turn things over to our staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as has been our practice over the last number of months, there is a motion for your consideration with respect to holding this meeting electronically without members of the public present.
Okay, looking for a motion.
So moved.
Move Director Raymond, second Director Dixon, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
And the next item, Mr. Chair, is your report from our Regional and Corporate Services Committee.
Thank you. I think the RACS committee meeting may have been an all-time short meeting this morning. There was a little discussion around the the annual report around invasive species, very limited discussion. And then following that, there was an item regarding the social and affordable housing survey, which I believe there was no discussion around. So everything else was on the agenda for the meeting if anyone would like to peruse it. I'll turn things back to Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we'll be looking for approval of the agenda, and late items, but I would like to note that staff would like to request removing item 8.1 from today's agenda, and we'll bring it back another time.
That sounds very nice.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Engard.
Yeah, I'd like to add a late item to the agenda, please. Namely, to provide directors an opportunity for discussion today around the COVID-19 relief funding from the province. I noted at LGLA a considerable number of raised concerns from other electoral areas, and I'd like to also discuss the viability of staff writing a joint letter of support for our electoral areas to the province.
Okay, thank you, Director Engard. So staff, we can fit that into our agenda.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we would add that as item 10.1, which is under addenda and late items.
Okay, 10.1, good. So we would need a motion for the approval. Moved Director Engard, second Director Dixon. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
Next item is 4.1. We have the draft Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of January 14th, 2021.
Motion. Move Director Raymond, second Director Dixon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
Item 4.2, we have the draft Electoral Area Services Committee of the whole meeting minutes of January 14th, 2021.
Okay, motion, Director Raymond, second Director Dixon, discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Item 5.1 is an information item. It's the 2021 request for board and committee workshops. As you are all aware, there have been a number of requests of staff to hold information workshops, strategy sessions, and whatnot over the last year or so. And staff have put together this tentative calendar that will hopefully meet the needs for these kinds of requests. Some may take the form of a presentation as part of a regular East meeting, or perhaps as part of a regular board meeting, and some other items will require a little bit further in-depth study, which might result in a half-day or potentially a full-day workshop.
Okay, thank you. So this item is for information only. Any discussion, directors?
Davidson.
Director Davidson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just through to staff on the gravel workshop. I do have some outstanding questions with staff reference to Stave Lake Quarry. I'm just looking for an indication from staff that I'll get some kind of reply either during the workshop or prior to the workshop on gravel.
Through the chair to Director Davidson, I have been following the conversation that the requests that you've been sending in via email. I would suggest that at this time, staff has provided all of the information that they're able to based on those questions, and that I would encourage you to bring them up during the course of the workshop.
So the one question I have in mind was I had asked for correspondence on any kind of enforcement literature between the FERD and Stave Lake Quarry, and I'm not really sure why that would be a workshop question, in that I'm just asking for copies of the normal correspondence that goes out to any electoral area director during the course of a bylaw investigation. And this would have been to my predecessors in the role. I'm just trying to find out what kind of enforcement activity has happened to date. So I'm not really sure why that's a workshop question. It's more of an operational, what happened? Where are we? I'm still not getting a definitive answer one way or the other.
Through the chair to Director Davidson, I guess I would suggest that in that case, perhaps we could schedule a meeting between yourself, the chair of the East meeting, and this doesn't really relate to the item that's on the table before us today. Perhaps we could meet about that offline.
Sounds good.
That
Thank you.
sounds like a reasonable suggestion. So good. Thank you, Director Davidson and Ms. Kinnaman. Any other discussion regarding the workshop outlines? Seeing none, we'll move forward.
Item 5.2 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Electoral Area Volunteer Fire Department Establishment and Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 1623. There's a motion for your consideration.
Move, Stobart.
Director Stobart, second.
Dixon.
Director Dixon, any discussion? So staff, I understand this is a reorientation of staffing. Manager emergency protective services is now the fire protection. No, manager of EA emergency services reassigned as manager of protective services. I was just curious, just what that means to us.
As you will recall, Chair Dickey, back in the fall, we talked about the pending resignation of a staff member on our team. And I had proposed to the committee about a modest restructuring to the organization to enhance this area and provide, redundancy in the protective services division. There is a bylaw associated with that role. And so this is just basically a housekeeping item to address those changes.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
Item 6.1 is 2021 grant and aid request for the Creekside Mills at Cul-De-Sac in Electoral Area H. There's a motion for your consideration.
Dixon move.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Second,
Second.
Director Engar. Any discussion?
Dixon.
Yep, please go ahead, Director Dixon.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say I have had a few conversations with the applicant who put this together for Creekside Mills, and they are trying to enhance their community and make things a little safer, a little more healthier in the area where they live. So I do support it.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
Item 7.1 is the Fraser Valley Regional District North Bend Sewer System Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1598.
Move, and I have a comment as well.
Thank you, Director Raymond. Second, Director Stobart. Discussion, Director Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was concerned about the addition to the sewer system. I spoke to Mr. Chan about it because it had looked like there was more than just one property going to be involved in this expansion, but he assured me that there was only the one property. And taking him at his word, which I will because I believe our staff, I am in favor of adding this property to that system.
Okay, thank you, Director Raymond. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
8.2, we have Development Variance Permit 2020-26 to vary the maximum height from 12 meters to 15.5 meters for the proposed single-family dwelling at 20718 Edelweiss Drive in Electoral Area C.
Okay,
Bales,
thank you, Director Bales moves. Second,
Stobart.
Director Stobart. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
8.3 is Development Variance Permit 2020-01 to reduce the rear lot line setback and to vary the definition of height to allow for a 3-story single-family home at 20903 Snowflake Crescent in Electoral Area C.
Looking for a
Bales.
motion, Director Bales, second Director
Dixon.
Dixon. Any discussion?
Bales, just that I did talk to staff about these and they seem to be fine with things like setback. So I'll just wait to hear from public comments after the mail out happens.
Okay, thank you, Director Bales. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, contrary, motion carries.
8.4, we have development variance permit 2021-02 to vary the setback requirement from a highway for a proposed single-family dwelling at 20920 Snowflake Crescent in Area C.
Motion. Director Stobart moves, second Director Raymond. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, the motion carries.
8.5, we have a request for FBRD to initiate a zoning amendment for 5 privately owned properties adjacent to Coquihalla River Provincial Park in Electoral Area B.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. I am guessing that Director Adamson isn't present. Oh,
Just see
I'm
here.
here.
I believe
I'll
he's
move
on.
it.
Oh, there
Okay.
it is.
Did you hear, can you guys hear me?
yeah, you're loud
Okay,
and clear.
Yeah, I move it. Thanks.
Second,
the-
Bales.
So there are a number of options to choose.
Can I see them because I haven't got it in front of me? What are the options?
If it's helpful, the staff recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that the Fraser Valley Regional District Board direct staff to initiate a zoning amendment for 5 privately owned properties adjacent to the Coquihalla River Provincial Park in Electoral Area B. That's the motion for your consideration.
So, and as I understand it, option 1, the FERD accepts the costs of rezoning.
Mm,
2, the FERD does not initiate rezoning. That is the responsibility of the landowners.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, the way it was explained to me by Graham was that the staff either had to take it from where it's at and make it full residential, or there was, can we get Graham to explain it? Would that be okay?
Mr. Danilus, perhaps.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. This item relates to 5 properties that are essentially a donut hole in the middle of a provincial park. When the zoning bylaw for the area was adopted in 1989, the properties were zoned as park P1 zone, which is really suitable for parks. It's not a zone that's suitable for single family residential use or rural residential activities. And the zoning, we believe, was an error. At the time, it appears that the regional district understood these lands to be within the provincial park, or that they would get incorporated into the provincial park. And that's turned out not to be the case. Indeed, they're simply privately owned lands, essentially surrounded by provincial park. So the zoning is really not an appropriate zone for the properties. And we believe the zone was placed in error back in 1989. And that's the rationale for the staff recommendation, is that the regional district undertake a rezoning to correct this error.
Thank you, Mr. Danilus. As I understand the staff report, there is some discussion as to whether the rezoning should be to R1 or R4. One allows future subdivision, the other one would not allow future subdivision.
That's certainly the case, Chair. The property owners have requested a zone that, in our view, could potentially facilitate a future subdivision. Generally speaking, when properties are rezoned to facilitate a subdivision, it's the responsibility of the property owner to demonstrate the suitability of smaller lot sizes. We wouldn't view that as the regional district's responsibility, and certainly those kinds of technical reports that would be needed to support rezoning that aims to facilitate subdivision, that would require technical reports like proving out on-site services, probably geohazards, those sorts of things. Those are not expenses that in the view of staff, the regional district should undertake. On the other hand, if the zoning was for a different zone with larger parcel sizes, such as the R4 zone, that reflects the current use of the land, not a future intensification of use, that those costs would be much less. They'd be limited to public hearing costs and staff time, and perhaps the regional district could accept those kinds of costs in order to correct this error of the application of inappropriate zoning to the properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Danos. So, Mr. Danos, did you want to speak as to what the staff recommendation would be to either have the electoral area directors forward this as an R4 or as an R1, and with the initiation either between the FERD or the landowners? Or would you prefer that the directors decide that?
What I would suggest, Chair, is that the staff recommendation is for the board to authorize staff to undertake a rezoning. And in the view of staff, the R4 zone with a 4 hectare minimum parcel size would be more appropriate. Of course, if the board authorizes us to undertake the work, we'll do further analysis. And we're prepared, of course, to revise our thinking there if it bears out, it's borne out by further analysis. But at this point, we see the appropriate zone as being R4. That would allow these property owners to continue to use the properties as they are, largely for rural residential type uses. It wouldn't support further subdivision. And if in the future the property owners want to subdivide the lands further, they can look at rezoning and pay the costs of the kinds of assessments that would be needed for that kind of rezoning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Danluz, for a nice summary of the situation. Director Adamson, hearing that.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I was trying to explain what I wanted. Yeah.
So
I say we take it to the L4 and they can rezone it in the future for subdivision if they want to. Try.
Okay, thank you. So that would be option 1 as I.
Option 1, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. And did we have a seconder?
Dixon.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Dixon.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Director Dixon.
Just a little more information, I guess, probably from Mr. Daniluz. So it seems this was started once before, and the process was never completed for a variety of reasons, I think. Is the advantage of the FVRD initiating the rezoning is that this time around it would be completed, and then moving forward, it then would be up to the individual landowners?
Okay, thank you, Director Dixon. Director or Mr. Daniluz, would you like to reply?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Some years ago, in the mid-1990s, the regional district responded to a similar request from the owners, and the regional district initiated a zoning amendment. It got to a late stage in the zoning amendment. I believe there was a public hearing and may have received 3rd reading, but the process broke down, as I understand it, over a disagreement with the property owners about the registration of a covenant that would not allow gravel extraction on the properties. The owners refused to offer that kind of covenant, and the zoning amendment broke down. Staff don't have an opinion at this stage about whether that kind of covenant would continue to be appropriate, but what we can say is that the owner that we've been talking with is willing to engage in that kind of covenant and has offered one. So we don't anticipate the same kinds of conflicts to arise this time. Of course, it'd be at the discretion of the board whether to adopt this kind of zoning amendment or not at the end of the day.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniluz. Director Dixon, did that satisfy your query?
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Through to Mr. Daniluz, apologies if you already covered this, but for the staff recommendation, would there be additional costs associated with the consultant work that typically fall back onto the applicant? that the FRD would have to bear in that particular case, or are we all good as far as third-party consultant work goes to carry on?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Director Davidson. Mr. Danilus?
So, through you, Chair. Staff haven't performed a thorough analysis of the proposal. In our view, that would come after the committee and board give us direction. What our hope is that the rezoning could be accommodated with a minimal amount of technical reporting that would be required. It may well be a fairly straightforward rezoning, but if there are if we get into it and discover that there's a need for technical reporting by paid consultants, that's an issue that we would bring back to you for further direction and have a conversation with the property owners about costs as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Thank you, Director Davidson. Any,
Mr. Chair,
pardon me?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Director Raymond.
I'm just curious, when you're talking about doing these investigations on that property, was not most of that done originally before it was the original one was sought?
Mr. Danilus.
The zoning bylaw was originally adopted back in 1989. And we haven't done a deep dive into the file history, but it doesn't look like there was some comprehensive reporting on these specific properties at that time. In 1996, we've done a cursory review of the file. That's really what gives us an indication that maybe the zoning could advance without any kind of costly technical assessment. It doesn't look like there was much done at that time, and we're hoping that that would be the case again. But I'd want to emphasize, we haven't done a great deal of analysis here. We've looked at it in relatively superficial terms. We would do that once we got a direction from you about how to proceed.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. Thank you, Director Raymond.
Adamson.
Director Adamson.
Yeah, I think that because somebody did it wrong in the day, we should at least bring it up to the L4. If at this time, if the people want to get for subdivision, couldn't they not pay money and get it done all at the same time?
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. Mr. Danilus.
Thank you, Chair. To Director Adamson, if the intent of the property owners is to rezone to a zone that would facilitate subdivision, I'd suggest that would be an indicator that the property owners should make their own application, pay the application costs, rather than put the regional district in a position of being the applicant for an application that would achieve a subdivision for a private interest, a private party. That's probably not the place the regional district wants to be in that kind of application. And if the owners want to achieve a subdivision, then I think they ought to pick it up and the board should decline from initiating the zoning itself.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. And certainly that would seem to be procedurally the correct way to go forward in my eyes. Director Adamson, did you have anything further to add? You're muted, Director Adamson.
Yeah. No, I think, the staff came up with good answers, and I think we should just, I don't know, in fairness, if they were supposed to be L4 before and we didn't give it to them, we should give it to them at our expense. Anything more than what they should have had, I think they should pay. So I'm happy with staff looking into this.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adamson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving to item 9.1, we have the Rockfall event at Twig Terrace in Sunshine Valley, Electoral Area B. This is an information item, and as part of our ongoing efforts to work with the committee and educate them on the various emergency management files that come up from time to time in the regional district. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Any discussion?
Adamson.
Director Adamson.
I'm glad nobody was hurt in this incident. I do believe there's going to be more because of we had that slide in 2011, I believe, took out 5 houses, and it weakened it, and so there's not much soil on the rocks. and the trees are getting heavy. If they get soaking wet like they did last time, they're coming down. They just let go from the rock, smooth rock, and fall down. In 2011, I had the opportunity to go in a little helicopter to see it after it happened, and it was amazing that big trees can grow with that little soil. I don't know what to do because I think there's a lot involved with stopping these things from happening or trying to stop these things from happening, and it's not our budget that should be doing it. It should be the province because it's crown land falling on residential property. So I just do the best we can here, and on this note too, in 2011 I flew up with Lynn Orstad, who was our emergency person at the time, and I should let you guys know she passed away last week. She was driving her car out of Sunshine. She lived in Sunshine Valley, and they said they saw her car slowing down, and then she went off the road slowly. If they think it was a heart attack, she wasn't physically hurt. It was just dead, right? So I just want to pass it on. She was with us, I don't know how long, at the regional district, but she did, in my opinion, she was the person I'd want in charge if there was an emergency. It's that type of person in charge. Anyway, thanks. Rambled enough.
Yeah, no, thank you, Director Adamson, and thank you making us aware of that. I'm sorry to hear that. Lynn Orstad worked with us for many years. Yeah.
Dixon.
Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I was reading this one, it felt, and just maybe if there is some clarification for me, it felt like another provincial area that really they want to download onto the local government. And when I read things like there's no provincial funding mechanism to address mitigative works, and so my question is that can possibly be something that regional district can take on the cost of, but is the province aware of this concern, or I'm just kind of wondering where that's at, or should we be at least sending a letter? Like, I just don't know if there's anything we could do. You just heard Director Adamson say, he figures more are going to be happening, but that's my question is there something we can do to get the province on board a little more?
Adamson.
Yep. Thank you, Director Dixon. Go ahead, Director Adamson.
The province, in my opinion, isn't going to help because when 2011, when we had the slide there, the only person out of the 5 houses that got anything was one gentleman and his wife. They lived there full time. The house was worth $300,000 before the slide, and they got some PEP money, $56,000. Everybody else, their houses got wiped out. They didn't get anything. The province isn't in the insurance business. That's what I heard from them. And the insurance business isn't in the business because that's an act of God. So these people, their houses are wiped out. They got nothing for it. And some of them have rebuilt in the same spot, which is like crazy. If we had done the zoning, those 5 lots would not have been able to build on. But now they're rebuilding there, and we live in the mountains. This is going to happen a lot, so anyway, thanks.
Good, thank you, Director Adamson. So is there any further discussion? Seeing none. Staff, when I read the report from the consultant, the final bullet in the conclusions talks about existing and future landowners should be informed of unacceptable hazard affecting their lots, that a retroactive mechanism might be found to attach a hazard notification to title to educate existing and future owners of the hazards affecting their sites. That kind of language just sets off an alarm bell to me. Is that in any way deemed the responsibility of the regional district to see those notices on title be placed there, or is that a provincial responsibility?
Mr. Chair, I see that Mr. Daniluz has taken himself off mute. I believe he probably wants to speak to that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've shared the Cordilleran report with all the affected property owners to raise awareness of the risks that they face there. The regional district and local governments in general have no ability to require these kinds of safe harmless covenants on title, except when we're in a development approval process. So we can require them through the building permitting process when there's a building permit application or in the course of a development approval, but we can't force owners in situations like these to provide us with a safe harmless covenant. So we simply don't have the authority to do that. We've asked the province about it, raised it with our counterparts at the province. They don't have any solutions for this particular issue, and the province doesn't appear to be interested at this point in taking up that initiative themselves or broadening the powers of local governments to require these kinds of covenants. So there isn't a mechanism at the moment for us to act on that recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Danilus. My concern, more specific concern, was that if a consultant has filed a report with us saying that people should be notified of any hazards, future landowners should be informed of unacceptable hazards, that if there was an event in the future and either material or physical harm resulted, that someone might come back and say, a consultant advised you to put on title and some kind of notification that this is a dangerous situation, that we might be held responsible if we hadn't seen that done. I'm not sure that what you spoke to really addressed that. Perhaps I misunderstood that.
Apologies, Chair. The regional district doesn't have any ability to place safe harmless covenants on the titles of these properties. We can't fulfill this recommendation from the consultant. We simply don't have the authority. We don't have the powers to do it. We pointed that out to the to the professional who wrote the report. We pointed it out to our counterparts at the province. We suggested that the province could investigate whether they've got powers to do something similar. The staff that we spoke to at the province declined to take that up. So I do appreciate that this kind of recommendation could lead to a misunderstanding in the future of somebody reading it after a subsequent event. But the simple answer right now is we can't possibly fulfill this requirement. We don't have the legal authority to do it.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus, for a very concise and a nice summary of the situation. I misunderstood your original explanation.
Mr. Chair?
Director Raymond.
Thank you. I'm just curious because Director Adamson said they're rebuilding their homes there. Did they make application for building permits or anything?
There's no building permits in Sunshine Valley required. They're out of the building inspection. Got out, I believe, in '84. The people in charge at that time let them go. So we can't even do zoning. We tried to get zoning in there, and that way we could have zoned, said they were bad lots, don't rebuild on them, but they voted down zoning in a referendum. So it's kind of buyer beware in Sunshine Valley. And that's all we can do, I guess.
So that would mean we have no involvement in it at all anyway.
Right, yeah. Well, no, I mean, still involved with Sunshine Valley. It's just, we don't have
What I'm trying to say is that people build wherever they want, then why would we be taking on something to say that there's hazards in the area if we can't do anything about it anyway?
Okay, thank you, Director Raymond. Staff, did you want to speak to what our procedural limits are in a case like this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Director Adamson is quite correct. The regional district doesn't provide building inspection services to Sunshine Valley, nor do we regulate land use through zoning. So we were not involved, as Director Raymond suggested. It's quite right. We're not involved in development approvals. We don't have any involvement in regulating construction there. And even if we were involved in zoning and building inspection, we wouldn't have the authority or the legal ability to place restrictive covenants on the property titles in this instance.
Yeah, but, sorry, if I may, Mr. Chair. We may
ahead,
not be able to put restrictive covenants on it, but we could refuse building permit.
Through the chair, yes, indeed, Director Raymond. If the Sunshine Valley was within a building inspection service area, we could refuse building permits on the basis that the land's not safe for the use being proposed. Of course, they're not in a building inspection service area, and there's no requirement to obtain a building permit from us.
So that goes back to my beginning question: is why are we involved then in this geotech hazard that's happening up there? And yeah, why are we involved in it if we can't do anything about it anyway?
Mr. Daniels?
Yes, through the chair to Director Raymond, excellent question, that one. We're involved because we provide emergency management services. And so in this case, we received an email notifying us that a rockfall had occurred on the weekend. And that's what got us engaged in the issue. We contacted the province and organized a response. And now, of course, in this case, the rockfall comes from Crown Lands. The province has geotechnical engineers on staff, and they started the investigation and then ultimately hired Cordiller and Geoscience, a geoscience consultant, to do the assessment. Our role through this was largely to coordinate between the province and the property owners, provide a channel of communications, and offer support to the property owners in as much as we could. Once the report was complete, we took it on ourselves to send it out to all the property owners and offer up further conversations and connection to the province. And really, that's the limit of our emergency management role in this case.
Thank you. I don't know. Personally, I would just say we should be stepping right out of the picture. I hate to say that because it puts lives in danger up there, but I think that if we get too far into it, the province is just going to shove it onto our table.
Okay, thank you, Director Raymond. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Adamson. I know we're not really super involved with Sunshine Valley, but I tell you, if you have something like that happen in your area as electoral director and you're not there, it's really bad. You got to be part of it. Even if we don't give out permits or anything, they still pay taxes to us. Okay.
Well, I'm not saying not to be there after the incident happens. I'm saying we shouldn't be involved in it to stop the incident from happening. That's not our role. And they have chosen that themselves in Sunshine Valley.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, Chair, that's true. But some people want it. And as recently as before COVID, they wanted us to look after one subdivision, but that never came through. They always at the end, they back out. So, but got to do what we can, right?
Okay, good. Thank you, directors. Maybe just Mr. Daniels, finally, are you comfortable with the procedure that we followed here and feel that this is the correct way forward in an instance like this?
I am Chair Dickey. Our role through our emergency management service is really to help out during emergencies. We did that in our work with the province. Our attempt was to keep the focus on the province taking action, paying the cost of the geotech report, putting some pressure on the province to follow through on any subsequent works that are needed. That truly is the role of the province. It's not the role of the regional district to fix slope stability problems on Crown land or to protect private properties. So I'm satisfied in the sense that we limited our role to what our core service is, which is to respond to emergencies and provide some support to the owners and the province. And we avoided getting engaged in areas that are outside our mandate that ought to be done by the province. So I think given that context, I'm content with our response.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. So any further discussion? Director Adamson.
Yeah, I just would like to point out that I've had 2011, I had that slide over there. The province came out and met with them lots of times and working out stuff. But this last year's one where we had the mudslide and the river kicked out and started eating away the bank at those people's houses in Dogwood, the province was really slow in doing anything. I think they're not as quick as they were 5 years ago. I don't know if they're not putting enough manpower or money towards it, but they were really, really slow on the uptake this time. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you, Director Adamson. Any other discussion?
Dixon,
Yeah, Director Dixon.
not that we need to beat this to death, but I do agree with Director Raymond. I think this seems to me a group of Sunshine Valley have built a home with no permits in areas where they know there's dangers, and or maybe they didn't initially, but after they've rebuilt their house in the same spot, I'm sort of struggling a little bit to understand why they might be surprised, when another natural disaster kind of occurs. So I want to thank Mr. Danos for his response and the work, and just to really encourage it to keep where they belong. Whatever's the provincial job, it should be doing that, and the FAD mandate to just take that part on.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon.
Adamson, I just want to say that I believe the reason people are rebuilding on those same spots is they figure it's already came down that area. I'm not an engineer, but when I was a kid, I used to build dams in the river. And if the middle goes out, the edges come right after. So the middle went out. The middle people are rebuilding again, because if you had a cabin there and it was worth 300,000 or 400,000, and suddenly it gets wiped out, you don't get any insurance money, and all you got is this piece of land, they rebuilt, and then flip it to some owner that doesn't know about it, right? That's the problem with unregulated areas. Like, nobody knows. The buyer has to be aware. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. Sounds like a complicated situation. Seeing no other discussion, this is an information item. We will move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we'll move down to the next information item 9.2, which is changes to emergency response cost compensation and EMBC's finance guide for local authorities and First Nations.
Okay, this is for information only item also. So any directors, any comments? I believe this is going to result in some large scale changes the next time we have an emergency within our electoral areas. Because past, it seems that the funding was in place through the province to cover off all these costs, especially our staffing costs, and those no longer are available, at least to the same extent. So that is going to be interesting to see what happens in the next emergency event. Staff, did you want to speak to that?
Mr. Danilus want to comment, or I'm happy to if he's.
Yes, briefly, Chair. The emergency management community, I think, is still assessing what these proposed changes mean in the way that the province covers costs, local government costs for responding to emergency events. Our understanding at this point is that there would be some costs that are currently covered that no longer will be once this framework's put in place. One of the concerning elements is that local governments had very little opportunity to assess these changes and provide comments back to the province. There could be budget implications and other adjustments local governments need to make to adjust to this reality. And frankly, there was very little opportunity. And so that's the thrust of our comment back to the province at this point, is that they really need to engage local governments when they're considering these kinds of changes, so that we can let them know what it means for us. The province has backed off temporarily. They've provided a comment period, and they're looking to return to bring back this policy later in the year after they've had a chance to to assess local government's comment. So it's a success there, but it's on the agenda today in part to let you know about the kinds of pressures that emergency management programs, local government emergency management programs across the province face. There's in my view, a kind of a retrenchment by the province. They're looking to reduce their cost profile. There's a constant pressure for local governments to pick up the slack, and it's a real challenge for us given our funding limitations and the nature of our resources and especially the scope of regional district electoral areas.
And
Okay,
if I could
thank
just
you.
further,
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Kinnaman.
I was just going to further add that this is definitely a hot topic of conversation among the CAOs for regional districts. And certainly I know that Ms. College has been having the same kinds of conversations among the BC emergency program coordinators. So province-wide, this is one of the top topics of conversation of late, of course, next to COVID. And I feel confident that you'll be getting future reports as this progresses.
Thank you. So we should schedule our emergencies to take place prior to November 2021.
Yes, please.
Director Raymond, please go
Thank
ahead.
you. I'm just wondering if this is that much of a concern province-wide, if we should not be sending from our board a letter to UBCM asking them to look into this a little further and to come up with some dialogue with the province on it through UBCM.
Thank you, Director Raymond. Staff, did you want to comment on that?
I'll turn this one over to Mr. Danilus because I know that there's been some work underway already in terms of letters. We have that letter that was on our agenda about the committee that Ms. College sits on and using that committee as a bit of a springboard to help advocate for these issues. But maybe Mr. Danilus wants to comment further.
Thank you, Director Raymond. Yes, indeed. I like that suggestion very much. Our intention is to do some further analysis about what these changes might mean, prepare a subsequent report to you, and then on the basis of that report, I think it would be a very good idea for you to consider a letter from the committee or the board through to UBCM and raise these issues through those channels as well.
So could I put that as a motion in this?
Yep. Thank you, Director Raymond. The motion is that the letter be written through the board to UBCM regarding emergency management concerns. Seconder?
Dixon.
Director Dixon, any discussion?
Adamson, I thought I heard Graham say the letter would come after they do more research. I just, if I'm wrong, I'll vote for this. But yeah, I thought he said they had to do more before we even reach out to the.
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with a motion of this nature coming forward, just with the understanding that staff are still doing that analysis, and they'll bring forward that letter and the analysis with in a future report. But I'm comfortable with the resolution as long as it's not with the expectation we're going to draft a letter today.
What?
Good. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman and Director Adamson. Director Raymond, did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. Thanks. I'm happy with that.
Good. Thank you. Any other discussion? Then all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries.
And item 9.3, we have minor superficial landslide at Mount Breckenridge in Harrison Lake. Again, an information item, and happy to discuss it with you further.
Okay, any discussion?
Bales?
Director Bales.
Oh, I'm just curious through the chair to Ms. College. I didn't see anything about any name stream. I think I saw this on a video the day it happened. And it looked fairly substantial, but I don't know how deep it ran. And I'm just curious if there was any impacts from logging or if there's anything that looked causal or yeah, I guess there's still a lot of information that needs to come in, but, and it's on Crown land, so it doesn't really affect us, but it could affect Harrison, it sounds like, if there was a bigger slide.
Thank you, Director Bales. Ms. College, did you want to speak to this?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Director Bales. we don't know what we don't know, and we were not the primary agency responsible for the geotech assessment on this, nor the helicopter flyover. So I would love to give more information, and I can reach out to the province and find out what they may or may not know. There has been more than 30 years of geotechnical stability research done on the Mount Breckenridge slope, so it's a slope that has mobility and has been studied with interest of scientists. I don't know what the correlation is of trees in relation to logging, and I don't know if there is even a geological linkage there.
So no stream. It almost looked like a crevice there. But did you see the video? I meant to send it on, but
I did, yes. That social media video that was posted on Facebook is actually what alerted us to this. And it was really, really timely of the province to just jump up and respond so quickly to ensure that there is no greater safety hazard.
Good. Thank you, Ms. College. Thank you, Director Bales. Any further discussion, Director Raymond?
Thank you. I'm just going to bring something up here. Probably some of our staff aren't even born yet. But I remember quite a number of years ago that there was a huge hazard warning put out to the village of Harrison Hot Springs and anyone along the lake on Mount Breckenridge, because they thought a lot more was going to come down into that lake and create some severe damage. That's going back quite a few years.
Yeah, thank you, Director Raymond. I recall that also. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move forward.
So now we move to item 10.1, which was the addition to our agenda on the COVID relief funding.
Good, thank you. So I think Director Engar had forwarded this. Director Engar, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I should note that at the I'm certainly not the person that has the most knowledge of all the different inequities between municipalities receiving these COVID relief funds and electoral areas, but from my understanding, it's significant. And there was certainly a lot of discourse and unrest at the LGLA, people saying how concerned they were that the electoral areas were getting the short end, very, very short end of the stick in comparison. Now, there's some validity in why a municipality will obviously have more funding than electoral area, because the province is certainly responsible for a number of things that in electoral areas where they're not in municipalities. That said, it's a real concern to a lot of electoral areas around the province that these funds are at least a little bit more equitable than they currently are. So I'd like to hear from other directors today, if you care to speak to this, whether or not you have similar concerns, and if we were to create a letter soliciting support from other people that have the same concerns in other regional districts and send that to the province, would that be something that you would sign on to? And any other suggestions, I'm all ears.
Good, thank you, Director Engar. Discussion, directors. Director Raymond. You're muted, Director Raymond.
I didn't want to say anything anyway. I know this was brought up with our electoral area services representative at UBCM is fully aware of this issue and has reached out to other regional districts and electoral areas about the issue, and is now working through with UBCM to bring it forward through there. But there are other electoral areas throughout the province that are worried about this thing and have a lot of questions about it. So Director McGregor has taken this on and is, I think, doing quite a good job at representing us in moving forward with the questions that we have about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Raymond.
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So for me, I was on that EA Director Forum as well. And being the analytical type that I am, I struggle with the label of inequitable when you don't really know how the formula was derived. As Director Engar says, there's reasons why it's not an apples to apples comparison, but without understanding without seeing the work, seeing how they derive the formula, I find it challenging to condemn it as inequitable. You can certainly say it's not the same, but there could be, or there might not be perfectly legitimate reasons. So for me, before passing judgment, I'd very much like to know how they came up with that formula, because that's where, if there is an equity, it would be in that how that formula came to light that inequity would live. So I don't think that was captured in the EA director forum discussion. It was more about, I heard one person say that, well, the formula is available, you can go look it up. It's not really the point. It's how is the formula was derived is where I'm at. And I'm not entirely sure if the EA director forum is going to yield that information or not. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. That's what I'm looking for. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Director Davidson.
Bales.
Director Bales.
It seemed to me there's quite an extreme gap in the equity, but also, while I would hope that they understand how many people in this from the cities come and spend their time in the rural areas, and the cost of that to clean up and just deal with. So it's almost like we have secondary residents for a large portion of the year. So hopefully they included that when they're thinking about it, but it doesn't seem like it.
Mr. Chair, would it be helpful at all if I spoke a little bit about the funding letter that we received and how the formula was derived? I certainly am not in a position to speak on behalf of the province, but certainly for the benefit of those directors who may not be aware of what the exact calculation, what that formulaic calculation was, I'd be happy to speak to that.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ms. Kinnaman.
Sure. So the way that the province presented this funding to local government is as safe restart funding to account for revenue shortfalls experienced due to COVID. So in the instance where municipal facilities such as arenas and recreation centers and what have you that rely on user fees, campgrounds, those kinds of things had to be closed down during COVID and would have experienced a loss of revenue. These funds were intended to help assist with that. The rationale that was provided that regional districts received a proportionately smaller amount of funding as compared to municipalities was based on the fact that regional districts were not disadvantaged from a tax perspective. And what they mean by that is that regional districts are not the tax collector. So in the beginning days of COVID, many municipalities provided tax relief windows for their residents where they did not have to pay their taxes on the 2nd of July or what have you. They were given an opportunity, an extension to that. And by having that extension, those municipalities were challenged financially. What they did not demand was that municipalities were still required to submit their requisitions to regional districts on time as scheduled. So the Fraser Valley Regional District, as an example, was not disadvantaged financially because we received our full requisitions from the municipalities in 2020. In addition, for rural residents who pay their taxes to the province directly, even if those residents did not pay on time, the province still submitted its payments to the regional district on time. So that was the rationale that was provided. In terms of the amounts, the calculation that they came up with was that every regional district in the province of British Columbia received a flat $300,000 amount. And then the other two portions of the funding were based on population on a per capita amount. So for the Fraser Valley Regional District, there was a $3.10 amount for every regional district resident, which for the 2018 population, that was 324,723. So that would include electoral area residents as well. So $3.10. to a maximum cap of 900,000. So ours, of course, was over 900,000. So we received the $900,000 maximum. And then for the rural population, there was an additional amount of $8.13 per capita with a population of 19,967. So that includes both electoral area residents as well as First Nations, for a total of 162,332. So the total amount received in Safe Restart funding was $1.36 million, for which the regional district could use for any number of COVID-related expenses. So upgrades to technology. As you all know, in the beginning of the pandemic, we were still able to hold meetings in our boardroom, but from a technology perspective, we needed to upgrade the boardroom technology to enable some remote participation and some in-person participation. The additional expenses in the electoral area, fire departments for personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, plexiglass in the building, those kinds of expenses that were it not for COVID, we would not have to have incurred those expenses. So that is the rationale that was provided and how the breakdown works for the 1.36 million. I am not aware of how much individual municipalities received and what their formula was, what their per capita formula was, but presumably it was a higher rate per capita based on the fact that municipalities tend to have more recreation type facilities, more facilities that rely on those user pay kind of revenue streams.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. So that was a nice explanation of part of the funding formula. The part that interests me more is the comparison between an electoral area and a municipality. So an electoral area receives through this amount that Ms. Kinnaman spoke to, $8.13 per capita. A municipality, so, and I keep using this example only because the population numbers are the same. My electoral area, Harrison Hot Springs, instead of $8.13, they receive $169,000 plus $308 per person. So those are the two numbers, $8 for me, $308 for Harrison Hot Springs. Now, I recognize there are differences in governance between the two bodies, but I don't recognize the difference between $8 and $308 plus $169,000. So we could speak all day, I think, about this topic. But I am still waiting, and I have asked people at UBCM and at the province to explain to me how this is in any way, shape, or form equitable, and I'm still waiting on a reply there. I think I am surprised that there were not provincial representatives at the electoral areas forum to address this issue, as we had made it very obvious that there were a lot of concerns province-wide around this funding formula. So I think I would agree with Director Engar that perhaps a letter from our regional district going out to the province asking for that explanation for why the electoral areas are being treated at the $8 level and the municipalities are being treated at $308 plus level would be, I think that's an important question to ask.
Davidson?
Directors who would like to discuss this.
Davidson again?
Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kinnaman. The explanation you gave, the explanation you read from the province is a better way to put it, raises other questions. Like, I can understand the argument for lost user fees, but deferred taxation revenue would indicate interest on the tax might be a financial loss to the municipalities, but it doesn't seem likely that, as Director Dickey, as Chair Dickey put it, that it can account for such a huge discrepancy. like the municipalities will get their taxes eventually. But in the meantime, they're getting a grant just to allow for one of the reasons apparently is an apparent temporary lack of that tax revenue. So yeah, I'm totally on board with further investigation required. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I,
It's, Director Inger, go ahead.
thank you. Just another example too of my concern as the director here is, I've got $11,000 a year in my grant and aid budget. It's pathetic, really. And yet my constituents and citizens, 1,500 approximate people, I really don't want to burden them anymore with the costs of maintaining the valley when a good deal of the valley costs are from visitors. So in this instance, the $8 or whatever it is that we end up receiving, I don't even see any of that personally. And how to put that to good use, for instance, with the ambassador program locally on the ground is not something I can see an avenue to making that work. So I appreciate that the money is being spent on our fire department to some regard. But that's the extent of it. And I struggle for funds to make practical things like the ambassador program, to keep the tourists apprised of how to take care of the valley, how to maintain cleanliness and clean up after themselves, all the things that the volunteers are busting their butt to do. I don't have any funds to help them other than that measly grant and aid, and they're not even allowed to hire people to do things with that money. So it's a frustrating scenario, and I don't mean to vent unnecessarily, but I would like to see whatever funds that do come also being applicable to grant and aid in worthy projects, not just things that admin feels they're necessarily good for. So I hope that makes sense. I'll look forward to hearing more comments.
Thank you, Director Inger. Director Stobart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through you to staff. Have all the known COVID-related costs with our fire departments been covered?
I'm sorry, through you to Director Stobart, have all of our costs been for which?
For our fire departments related to COVID, have they been covered with this funding?
Yeah, so through the chair to Director Stobart. So as part of the 2021 budget presentation, we identified of the $1.36 million, we had identified $803,000 to date related to expenditures for COVID due to revenue shortfalls and the purchase of that kind of equipment. So yes, any of the extra PPE and cleaning supplies and extra costs that were noted in the 2020 budget have been accounted for. We have, however, reserved any recommendations with the remaining $558,000 or so because we're still in this pandemic. And so it remains to be seen what will happen throughout the summer months, and staff are working tirelessly to make sure that we are able to apply these funds in the best way possible and to meet the auditing requirements of the funds that we do have to report on by year end.
Thank you, Ms. Kidden. Again, for me, in my area, I realize that, we're all hit a little differently with this, and other than our fire department, I don't see any additional costs that have actually happened in Area G, or at least none that can be covered. Unfortunately, I think the one mistake with this is nonprofits were not included in any of this, and it's very frustrating for our community halls. They haven't been able to operate. They operate largely on rentals, and of course there haven't been any for the most part over the entire year. So it impacts. It has a bit of an ongoing snowballing effect. In my particular area, the hall has an operator that stops the Lions Club. They haven't been able to raise funds. They normally support about 15 to 18 charities in Area G and in Mission as well, and in Area C. And so it's frustrating that those community halls, which are struggling again, because they still have to pay heat, they still have to pay light, they still pay water and all the rest of it. And they weren't eligible for any of these funds. So I realize that's outside the funds that were allotted. But again, that's the one that I find most frustrating for my area.
Thank you, Director Stobart. Just in my research on the criteria which apply to the COVID restart funds, actually grants to not-for-profits do fall within the criteria. That is a legitimate expense.
Yes, but the things like lost revenue apparently from rentals that may or may not have happened doesn't. So it would have, it didn't seem like there was more than the opportunity to pick up a couple $100.
Dixon.
Director Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support getting some more information, and what I heard at LGLA was, I think that this is basically a done deal for now, but just providing the message that, you know, if there are other funds to come along, that take another look at how they're allotted or allocated to regional districts. I actually would like to find out a little bit more too about the community hall, like loss of revenue, where our little Columbia Valley Hall is absolutely struggling with right now with zero income. And you're right, paying huge propane bills this time of year, as well as the insurance still has to be paid. And so I don't know if there's a way, or I'll take another look at that, I guess. But I think we do have losses, and we do have struggles and challenges that you know, that I think do need to be considered. And interestingly enough, and I don't know where this is at, we have Cul-De-Sac Park Ward within Area H, and they're struggling, and you know, so I'm not sure. My guess is the funds can't be used for that either, but I just think that there are losses and negative impacts in the regional districts as well. So I'd like them to take another look at that.
Thank you, Director Dixon.
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Just to echo community halls, if we can route some of this funding towards them at the end of the day, it would be an excellent thing for Area F as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Other
Bales?
discussion? Director Bales.
Oh, just a thought, signage might be good for cleanup, which would, instead of putting it all on parks for our area taxpayers, as well, possibly garbage cans. I don't know. There's a few things I can think that might help a little bit. I was pretty impressed with parks. Somebody complained about the ATVs going along the walking trail, and they put up signs for no ATVs the very next day. But we could use a whole lot more up the Chehalis Forest Road and at Lake Eric, and garbage cans and a few other considerations. There was a lot of complaints from Lake Eric from the onslaught of just overwhelming tourists. So.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Bales. Director Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I heard earlier that somebody was asking about, or sending a letter off to the government asking what the funding formula was. I would certainly support that. And also maybe in that letter, just pointing out a few of the things that electoral area people have to deal with as well. I have a bowling center and a swimming pool here, which took a real hit, and could certainly use some of that money. So I think I would make a motion that we send that letter forward, asking about the funding formula itself and how they came up with it, and why there wasn't more consideration given to electoral areas.
Good.
Mr. Chair, if I may just jump in for a second here before you get the motion and the mover and the seconder on that one, and just get some clarity. First, I would just like to let Director Raymond know that losses related to both the bowling alley and the community center in Boston Bar were included in that $803,000 as part of the 2020 budget, and those losses. So any of the service areas that experienced COVID-related losses were accounted for in that $803,000. But Mr. Chair, I would just ask if the motion could clarify who would be authoring the letter. And I don't mean I'm happy to write it and write a draft, but Would that be coming from the chair of East, or is the expectation that it comes from the chair of the board?
I would suspect from the chair of East, but I would also like to know how much money was given to the pool here and to our bowling center, because if I remember correctly, it was around $1,200.
So through the chair to Director Raymond, staff went through all of the service area budgets and found what amounts were directly attributed to revenue loss. And so as you can appreciate, in many instances, because facilities were closed, there was also a corresponding reduction in operating costs. And so they were able to find what that delta was in terms of revenue loss and reduction in expenditures, and applied those across the board to come up with this $803,000. I wasn't prepared to get into this level of detail on this today. This wasn't an item on our agenda, but if you'd like us to put an item on a future meeting where we can get into some very specific details at the micro level, I'm happy to do that.
I would just like to see this letter sent, and either by our chair or by the board chair. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Raymond. There's been a motion put on the table. Is there a seconder?
Second, Engar.
Second, Director Engar. Any discussion?
Yeah, Adamson.
Director Adamson.
The electoral directors are the Rodney Dangerfield of politicians. We don't get any respect. You know, most people don't even know what electoral director is. You have to explain it. Even people in the government, they don't know. I just, you know, I echo the words of my colleagues. Our community center lost their income from the meals they have and the fundraising they do. Sunshine Valley, the same. There was a lot of loss for the rural. But I believe that we need our own rural organization. Saskatchewan has one, and they've had it for years, like 100 years, I think. We need a voice that just talks to electoral directors. The cities, as we all know, shake us like a piggy bank whenever they want something. They're not looking out after our interests. We have to look after ourselves. And I really think that this is a time for an organization, but I digress.
Thank you, Director Adamson.
Bales?
Director Bales.
I seem to recall on that first meeting of the local rural area that I can't think of his last name. Rowley is his first name. He lives around Grand Forks, and he's a new MLA that used to be a rural director or a counselor at Grand Forks, and he did a lot dealing with the floods. So he seemed sympathetic, and there was a bit of discussion between Grace and Rowley. So couldn't think of his last name, but so I don't know if there was any final conclusion, but it seemed like there might be a letter in it from that area. Or
Okay,
somehow.
yeah. Thank you, Director Bales. Any further discussion?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
It just struck me now that if we're going to send a letter off to the government, we should be sending it off to our representatives in the government as well. So our MLAs, CC that to them as well. So they're aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Raymond. Any further discussion?
Just one more thing, Adamson. I'll give
Director
you some
Adamson.
advice I got from one of my buddies, Italian guy. To request timidly is to invite refusal. So we got to get strong and demand. It works for him. He enforces.
Okay, thank you, Director Adamson. So as it stands, Director Raymond, you would prefer this letter to go through the board or through Electoral Areas Committee? You're muted, Director Raymond.
Sorry.
No.
I think it may carry a little more weight through the board if they know that some of the municipal directors are on our side as well in questioning this.
Good. Thank you, Director Raymond. So we should be prepared at the board level to make our arguments. Any further discussion?
Adamson,
Director Adamson.
I think one of the other things that hit me as not very good is giving the money to places like the rec center in Hope. I know they had last income, and I think they should get money, but this is money for the regional district guys, like us guys. So giving it to something like the rec center, where my taxpayers already pay 30%, Hope pays 70. So if we put more from the electoral director in there, and they don't match it to the percentage, they're double dipping. Our money's going to the city, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Adamson. So as I understand it, the balance of the funding that came to the regional district is about $500,000. Perhaps we could ask staff to take a look at the needs within the electoral areas and whether some of that funding could be directed to the electoral area needs.
I second that.
So maybe would someone like to make that motion?
Okay, don't we have a motion on the table? Let's vote on
Yeah,
that.
you're right, Director Adamson. Thank you all. So unless there's a further discussion on the original motion.
So if I can just clarify the original motion, Mr. Chair, it is that the Electoral Area Services Committee requests that the FBRD Board Chair send a letter to the UBCM and the province, copy to all of the MLAs, with respect to equality in the formula for the COVID-19 Safe Restart funding. And I've captured all of the commentary here, so staff would draft that letter under his signature. Does that capture it?
That certainly is my understanding. Director Raymond, is that?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Okay.
Davidson,
Director Davidson.
sorry to demur on this, but the word that Ms. Kidman used was equality. And my understanding, we've been talking about an explanation, how is the formula derived? Asking for equality is pretty broad, and I'm not really sure what that means in this context. So I'm kind of struggling with it as worded. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Director Davidson. So on the issue of whether we should be asking to be treated equally or whether we were asking for an explanation on how the funding formula was derived.
Sorry.
Director Raymond.
I think the original motion that I had come up with had that asking how that formula was derived in it.
Okay, thank you, Director Raymond. Any further discussion on that wording?
Perhaps, if I may, Chair, equitable outcome for electoral areas versus equality. We don't expect the same amount as municipalities, obviously, but I would like to see a more equitable outcome, if that works.
So perhaps Director Angar, Director Raymond, Director Davidson, we could ask for both a more equitable allocation and explanation on how the formula was derived.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we can amend the original motion in that manner. Ms. Kinnaman, are you okay with that?
I am. I've captured the sense of all of the concerns here, and I will make sure that the letter reflects them. And you can review the draft, Chair Dickey, as Chair of EASC. And I guess since you are requesting the board chair to sign this, it will have to go before the board at the end of the month.
Thank you. Good. Okay, I think we're there. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Now, there was a second motion regarding the balance of the COVID funding that came to the regional district, $500,000, as to perhaps staff could look at a way in which the electoral areas could be allocated an amount of that money to needs within the electoral areas. Is that,
Very good.
am I getting the correct?
Yeah.
So if could I suggest a motion that staff bring a report to the next EASC meeting with some options in terms of how to provide, or if it's possible to provide, specific electoral area funding from the COVID-19 Safe Restart funding, something like
Good.
that.
Sure, that would be, certainly in my view, that would be fine.
That,
Directors, Director Dixon?
yeah, I'll move it. If you
Thank
need to
you,
move it.
Director Dixon, seconder.
Second, Angar.
Director Enger seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary, the motion carries. Thank you, directors. Thank you, staff.
Thank you very much. So moving down to item 11, reports by staff, as Director Adamson mentioned, we received the very sad news that a former FVRD employee, Lynn Orstad, had passed away earlier this month. I did just want to confirm that Lynn did work in that emergency management role here for about 7 years. She was very active in the ESS community. She has taught courses at the JIBC, and I understand that she also worked for the Red Cross. And I have asked our staff to make an in memoriam donation to the Red Cross for condolences. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Good, thank you. Ms. Kinnaman, is there perhaps something that the Electoral Area Committee could do on their own in this regard, or would you think this would cover things off?
At this time, that is all the information that we have. We have not received an obituary or any other kind of information. So we thought that maybe this gesture would suffice, but if we learn of something else, certainly we'll bring it forward for your consideration.
Thank you. Director Adamson.
I think what the staff is doing, she would like that, Lynn would like that. Lynn passed away with no siblings, no kids, so her friend, Peter Adamo, he's helping the police with the estate and stuff and get everything together. But yeah, I donate something to Red Cross. I'm sure she would appreciate that if she was here.
Good. Thank you, Director Adamson.
So
Okay.
moving down to reports by electoral area directors, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Director Angar, would you like to lead off?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. Yes, I went to the Residents Association meeting last night, and it was a very good meeting, small Zoom meeting. And we discussed their needs around the ambassador program and how to fund it ongoing. And it was a very successful program. And fortunately, the volunteers within the organization are still willing to go at it another year. I think there's a real need for a mechanism to have that an ongoing process, somehow self-funding and finding the capacity to do that ongoing is front on my agenda. Also, some good news. We now have some garbage passes to hand out here in the valley rather than making everybody go downtown and pick up a pass. So the volunteers don't have to go too far when they're having to pick up garbage, which is excellent. And that was very well received. A simple thing. It's the simple things in life. Garbage pass, they don't have to drive too far to pick it up. And here they are doing all this wonderful work. And I also spoke with Water Wealth recently and shared that with the Ratepayers Residents Association. And they're monitoring the Chilliwack River for climate changes and water levels. Very interesting work. And I only know the surface of what they're doing, but it looks like it will be contributing to the science around what may be happening to this river, the impacts of glacier melt over time and things like that. So very important projects ongoing for us all as we enter into climate change, wanting to make sure that we preserve the beautiful outback that we all enjoy so much. And other than that, I'm keeping the wood stove going, and the dogs are inside and nice and warm, and we've got our down jackets when we need them. So stay warm out there, everybody. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Director Angar. Director Dixon. Director Dixon, I think there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple meetings I've attended recently, of course, all through Zoom, and one was our Cul-De-Sac Water Safety Working Group, and still doing some work around that and looking at finding ways to sort of make sure that we have sort of designated area, or a little more clear anyway, for the non-motorized vehicles. BC Parks has recently put in a whole bunch of new buoys and markers for their swim areas, and they look great. And we think that will also help in the summertime, just to certainly more visible for those swimming and those out in their boats. So that's coming along. Our Goose Management Committee is also busy working, and we've submitted a permit to help manage the geese in our area again this year. And what else? We don't have the ability to have our Zoom meetings for the Columbia Valley ratepayers, so some of them don't have access. So we'll keep working on that one, as well as I really want to shout out to the Cul-De-Sac Park Board. Actually has an environment committee, and have residents that live there, and they are working hard to replant trees and get rid of ivy and those type of invasive plants, and they're really just doing a good job of looking after their park. And finally, attended a class meeting as well for Cul-De-Sac Sewer Aquatics, and had some really good presentations from a couple of regional district employees from Kamloops. One was Kamloops and the other one was the Kootenay area, Christina Lake. And just to hear what they're doing in their areas to look after and protect their lakes, as well as in particular the invasive species, some talk about milfoil and different things like that. So it's very informative, and keeps things going on. We can learn from each other. So that's it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Adamson.
Yeah, I went up to Sunshine Valley on the weekend, took a look at Tajmi and what they're working on now. They ran way over budget because of COVID, jumping the price of the material, and one of the gentlemen who was supposed to do the work originally got sick, and so they had to get new contractors. So we're really high, but it's exciting. They're hoping to get a grant to get some more work done, but they're going to have a big opening in May. They're looking at like a really big show opening, because they've been like 4 years now. And hopefully by spring, they'll have the theater room inside, the kitchen and all that done. It should be great. And you're all welcome. Everybody wants you to come and take a look at it. Okay? And the ratepayers in Yale, we're all getting tired of COVID, right? Everybody wants to get back to normal so you can go up to the rec center, the community center, and play cards, or just, visit with your neighbor. I think it's wearing hard on everyone. I'm sure everybody's area is the same. We're all social people, and we're not allowed to socialize. So it's tough, but everybody's doing great. Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Adamson. Especially thank you for bringing the Tashmi issue to our attention. It's such an important part of our history and something our children certainly should be aware of. Director Stobart.
Nothing to report.
Good. Boring is good sometimes. Thank you, Director Stobart. Director Raymond.
I'm all good, thank you.
Thank you, Director Raymond also. So Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So pretty quiet around here as well. I thought it worthwhile to share something I'm still working on with, or trying to get information out of Flynn Road on, and that's the community watershed designation. As you know, UBCM gives us the opportunity to have conversations with ministers and their staff. And the thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, what are the criteria for community watershed designation, and what's the process for getting community watershed designation for a given area? And because there doesn't seem to be any after some months of fruitless effort with both our own staff trying to work with Flynn Road staff to get an answer to those questions. So of course, right after UBCM, the election was called. We have a new minister responsible for Flynn Road, and I'm just following up to see if it was basically a reset, wait for next UBCM, or if staff was doing anything, if Flynn Road staff was doing anything with essentially new management at the top there. And they haven't been, but so I'm basically reinitiating that conversation to try to get some answers from them on those 2 points. And if anybody has any questions about it, let me know. In the meantime, I'll keep plugging away. Other than that, that's about it. Thank you.
Patience is a virtue, Director Davidson. Thank you for your report. Director Bales.
Nothing for today, thanks.
Thank you, Director Bales. On my side, we just recently put out an annual report for my community. Normally, we have an annual general meeting every January, and we have a really nice representation from the FERD staff there. Often get 70 or so people showing up, and people look forward to it because it's the one time during the year that they get a really good idea of what's evolving in the community. And of course, we couldn't do that this year. So the staff helped me put just a small, I think it was maybe 6 pages annual report together that we mailed out to everyone, and it seems to be very well received. It's the first time I've ever done that, and it seems to have worked out very well. I think I might do that in the future, whether we have a pandemic or not. So other than that, it's been quite quiet in my communities. I will turn things over to Ms. Kinnaman now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So item 13 is public question period for items relevant to the agenda. We've been encouraging members of the public to submit their email questions in advance of the meeting, and of course, welcomed members of the public to join us here on Zoom. I've been advised by our corporate officer that we did not receive any questions, and at this time, we do not have any members of the public on the line. So then we would just be looking for a resolution to close the meeting.
Good. Okay, thank you. So that motion, Director Raymond moves, second.
Adamson.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries. How much time?